It's the luck of the Irish. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I'm continuing my masculine feminine energies film breakdown series, celebrating St. Patrick's Day with the rom-com Leap Year. If you're not familiar with what I mean by masculine and feminine energies, I have a lot of videos going into much more detail about this, but a brief summary: masculine and feminine energies are energies that live within all of us. We all contain both energies, but we all have a core energy that's the one we're most ourselves in. That energy often links up with our gender. It doesn't have to, but it very often does. We can be in wounded or healed versions of either of these energies, and each of these energies contains archetypes. And we all contain all the archetypes within us that we can tap into whenever we need to. I have a lot of videos about the masculine and the feminine archetypes if you want to learn more. And in order to have sexual polarity in a relationship, you need one partner to be in the masculine and one partner to be in the feminine. These opposite energies attract sexually and same energies repel sexually. In honor of St. Patrick's Day, I wanted to do a tribute to my Irish ancestors. Last year on St. Patrick's Day, I actually did a breakdown of The Quiet Man, which is one of my favorite breakdowns I've ever done. A lot of beautiful scenery of Ireland. And I was looking for another film to do this year that had some kind of an Irish theme. And when I was searching for movies, Leap Year was really the main one that was like a rom-com. So I thought Amy Adams is always adorable. Let's give it a try. I do think this is a great movie to talk about masculine and feminine dynamics and things like that. I will say that this movie does feel, to me at least, like a really high budget Hallmark movie. Like, I knew exactly how it was gonna go and it was very predictable. I'm not really a fan of Hallmark movies usually because I feel like the acting and the writing and the predictability like all together is just, I can't with it. So with this movie, like the acting, the writing was better than how I see an average Hallmark movie, but it really did have that feeling. Like you kind of knew exactly how things were gonna go. And that actually brings up an interesting topic because these movies all are designed essentially to fit a female fantasy. One of the most common things that I see in anytime I do any movie that's kind of more of like a rom-com chick flick kind of a movie is the theme of there's two men, the woman has to choose between two men. Every single time, the man who is more financially stable, the one who has money, who has the success, the stability, that kind of stuff, he's always either a jerk or he's just boring. And the guy from like the wrong side of the tracks, like the bad boy, is always the one who is like the perfect man. He's always the dreamboat. And as I've mentioned in so many other breakdowns, I mean, this is just one of the most common themes that shows up in every kind of like chick flick type movie, is this idea of really what it is a woman having to choose between a protector and a provider. It's like, do you want the man who will provide for you, or do you want the man who can fight to protect you? I mean, I really hate this model because it always paints the provider as being the bad guy and it always paints the protector as being the good guy. Now, the fact that the protector is a good guy makes sense, right? Because if you're gonna protect someone, you kind of have to be a good guy, right? Because if you're that powerful and you're not protecting somebody, you probably are a bad guy. The thing is, they always paint the man who can provide, who's the provider, who has the money, success, power, that kind of thing, as being the bad guys, being evil. And I think we all know that in real life, it doesn't work like that. In real life, there are wealthy people who are good people and who are bad people. There are poor people who are good people and who are bad people. Somebody actually described it one time as money is an amplifier. So if you're like a good person who generally is doing good in the world and you make more money, you will generally use that money for good in some way. Whereas if you're somebody who's inclined to do bad things, you know, to the world, or, you know, somebody who is just out for their own self-interest, or somebody who is inclined to hurt people, if you get more money, you probably will use that money to hurt people. And the ironic thing is that in every area, like media, politics, all these areas that are trying to convince people, in this particular case, women, that like rich people are bad, like rich men are bad, men with money are bad. Who is the one like producing this media? Or the politicians that are trying to teach us that rich men are bad? They're usually rich men. And as we've seen a lot of things that have come out in the media, that a lot of these rich men that are creating these storylines are bad men. So it's kind of like they're telling on themselves, right? It really does end up putting women in this position where they're fearful of men who can provide for them because they assume they're all going to be bad people. Now, are there men out there who are, you know, can provide for a family or even will provide for a family and who use their money for bad things? Are there men out there who will use their money to manipulate, control, and abuse their families? Absolutely. That doesn't mean that all men are going to do that. But if you constantly program women, especially from a young age, to think that men who have money and success and power are always bad people, and women always end up choosing men who are not able to provide for them, it puts women in a state of having to be, at least partly, if not fully, the providers. And it puts a lot of strain on women, right? And you see this a lot now with women who are either deliberately choosing men who can't provide for them, or are getting themselves in situations where they insist on providing for themselves. So many women have been conditioned, some in their actual life, but also with movies and the media and things like that, where they believe that the man who can provide for them is always the bad guy, or he's just boring or uninteresting or something. It's such a dangerous narrative to put on people. And as women, it is important to determine, regardless of how much money a man has, you know, does he want to be a provider? You know, is he going to be a good person to me? Like, is he going to treat me well in addition to being able to provide? This idea of women having to choose between a protector and a provider is like, no woman is ever going to be satisfied in a relationship with a man who can't be both. Like, she needs a man who can protect and provide for her. And when we start having this idea of, oh, well, there's the man who's the provider, but like, he can't get his hands dirty and actually protect her. Like, he's too busy worrying about himself and his business and his money, so he's never actually going to protect her. And this doesn't just mean physical protection, it also means, you know, protecting her heart or things like that. You know, and then you have a man who is, say, physically strong and powerful and will protect her and fight for her, but he can't make enough money in order to actually put food on the table so that, you know, you can feed the family and stuff. No woman is ever going to be satisfied with a man who can only do one of those two things. I mean, again, this isn't about a woman needing a man who makes massive amounts of money, or needing a man who can just like kill another man with his bare hands or something like that. Like, those are extremes, obviously. But at the end of the day, as a woman, if you're gonna fully embrace your feminine energy in a relationship, you're gonna need to partner with a man who can both protect and provide for you. And again, that's not just superficial means. I mean, being able to bring in enough money so the two of you can actually live comfortably, yes, that's a factor. Being able to protect you from outside threats, absolutely. But it also means like protecting your heart, providing for you, you know, with love in a lot of different ways, and protecting you in a lot of different ways. As women, we really need to embrace what it is that we need from a man in a relationship, and not constantly get caught up in this idea of having to choose between two that really can't fully fulfill us the way that we need them to. And I'm noticing that there seems to be a pattern with a lot of these movies now, and I think this is a little bit more of a modern day idea, because there used to be more of the fairy tale where you'd have the woman who, like, lived in the woods or lived in poverty or was poor, and then she got rescued by a handsome prince who then like whisked her away to this like life of luxury type of thing. And like that was kind of the like made a common woman into a princess, and this was kind of like the traditional fairy tale that we would think of. A lot of these female fantasies that you see, I feel like this is a theme in so many Hallmark movies, and it was very similar in Leap Year, is the idea of a woman who is living this very domesticated life, and domesticated in an ironic way, because it's women who feel like they've escaped the slavery of being a domesticated housewife, but they trade that in for the slavery of being a career woman, really. I mean, it's kind of like as a woman, you're trading one area of being sort of a domesticated slave into another area of being a domesticated slave. And that's what you see in this movie, and you see it in a lot of the other, you know, sort of the rom-coms, is these women are basically devoted their whole life to career structure, achieving things, kind of, you know, having this life in the city where they're in this small box and everything is sort of like, I mean, it's even like the modern day idea of everything kind of being so minimalistic and almost like you're in a prison or something. I mean, it's the days of modern technology and things like that. Then this rough and tumble guy comes along, somebody who is more of an outdoorsy guy, somebody who is somehow connected to nature, or he's a cowboy, or he's some regular bloke or something, as it would be in this movie. Somebody who's more connected to our more like wild aspects of ourselves. And it's almost as if women are feeling like they want to be rescued from the concrete jungle of the city, the technology, and almost like whisked away to a much more like primal, earth mother aspect of themselves. I think that's what a lot of this is. I mean, again, it's like, I mean, you see it with, I mean, I think it's like the stereotypical like Hallmark movie thing where it's like, you know, a woman is like this career driven, power hungry, you know, independent boss babe woman, and then she ends up meeting this, you know, backwoods country guy, and she ends up like giving everything up and having her dream of running a flower shop or something like that. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of like the stereotypical idea. That's not really specifically what happens in this movie, but it's a similar kind of idea. It's like this woman who has this very city girl life, and she's kind of getting like rescued from that, the city life, into more of a like a country back road kind of a life. And I think that's a sign that many women today are desperate to connect with that earth mother wild woman side of themselves. And at the end of the day, as women, we don't need a man to do that. And I don't say this in like a, we don't need a man or anything like that. As women, regardless of our relationship situation, regardless of our love life or our lives or anything, we are nature. As the feminine, we are nature. We are a part of nature. So connecting to nature and that like earth mother side of ourselves, it's natural. It's natural if you feel like you have been, you know, stuck in this very sort of city life and, you know, a slave to your technology and things like that. Like regardless of what your living situation is, whether you're a, you know, a traditional stay-at-home mother or whether you're a boss babe career woman, either way, as a woman, you're gonna want to connect back to that very like primal wild woman in you. And I think that that's what a lot of these sort of modern day female fantasies are actually about. It's not even specifically always about the guy, although there's usually like a sexy cowboy kind of guy that kind of, you know, is the reason why she makes the shift. Which, hey, if you have a sexy cowboy that's helping you connect to your primal earth mother part of yourself, go for it. I mean, that's great. But as women, we don't need to wait for that to happen. Like we can do that for ourselves. Connecting to that earth mother part of ourselves is something that we can always do. And you know, this idea that women are trading in this sort of high-powered corporate controlling life and choosing to do something that's a true passion for them, something that brings out their creativity, whether it be a career or whether it be a hobby or something. I think there's a lot of women who really are longing to tap into that part of themselves. I'm gonna go down a different road right now. That to me is one of the problems that I've always had with feminism, and I have a video where I talk a little bit more about my views on feminism that dive into this much deeper. But feminism really did try to convince women that their only value was how much they could fit into a man's world. And I think it was a really missed opportunity to teach women that being a woman innately has value. What a woman brings to the world and what the feminine brings to the world has just as much value as what the masculine brings to the world. And like I say in a lot of videos, if you are a woman who wants to compete in a masculine world, you want to succeed in a masculine career, go for it. Like, this isn't to tell anybody how to live their life. I want women who feel like, ooh, I don't want to have to prove myself in a man's world. I want to embrace the parts of myself that are feminine. But you feel like that doesn't bring as much value to the world. I want to tell you that it does. Connecting to your feminine energy and celebrating the gifts that you bring to the world as a woman is absolutely valuable. It's valuable for you. It's valuable especially for every other woman on the planet, especially young girls. And it's a gift to men too. I really think that that's what a lot of these movies and this sort of like modern day female fantasy really is. As much as I love the 1950s housewife aesthetic, I absolutely do. If I could have myself a nice like kitschy pink kitchen and like bake cookies with my kids all day with a pretty ruffly apron on, I'd be all for it. But the 1950s model of a housewife was very constricting for women. It kept women in this very specific mold, like this very, you know, a cookie cutter version of everybody, ironically, because they were baking cookies. But it was a very cookie cutter mold, and it was very limiting. It was kind of like this suburban idea of everybody having to be the same and everything going the same way, and it was a very constricting thing for most women. Again, it also gave men the opportunity to abuse their power and things like that. That's a whole other subject. But when we decided to get women to escape that kind of domestication, we put them into a domesticated men's environment and said, hey, okay, you have to survive in this concrete jungle of power and money and influence, and the only way you're going to be able to have value is if you prove how much you can be domesticated like a man. For most women, neither one of those lives is really going to align for us, because the feminine wants to be free. She wants to be connected to nature. She wants to be connected to creativity, sensuality. And when she gets put in that structure, that constriction, she's gonna start fantasizing about being able to break free from that, whether it be the forced domestication of a very structured, controlling, you know, traditional life, or whether it be that structured, controlling, you know, more modern day life. Most women are really longing to escape both. They don't really want either one. They want to connect more with their wild woman as opposed to having to feel so perfect and polished all the time. This is where we get to Anna, played by Amy Adams, and I have to say I really relate to Anna. And not just because she is from Boston, which is where I'm from. I notice when people describe modern women, they always have a specific image in mind of what they think a modern woman is. Yet when you ask people, various people will have various answers of what they think a modern woman is. There are a lot of people who think a modern woman is kind of this, you know, like crazy rainbow colored hair person who's like yelling and screaming at some kind of political rally somewhere. Or a modern woman is, it's very like overly promiscuous, you know, OnlyFans, Instagram model, you know, with the BBLs and the fake boobs and the everything, like, you know, I don't need no man, I can make money on my own, like that kind of thing. When I think of a modern woman, like when you ask me like how would you define a modern woman, I would describe Anna. I absolutely would describe Anna. She's a career woman. She does have a very feminine career. She works with realtors as a stager, so she stages apartments and homes, you know, for realtors to help them sell things. And the idea of creating a beautiful space and creating a beautiful environment where people can be inspired to decide where they want to live, very feminine idea. I definitely believe that Anna is feminine at her core, but Anna is the epitome of a perfectionist. She needs to be in control of everything. She even says in the movie she doesn't like surprises. She needs everything to go exactly as planned. She is the ultimate perfectionist. She's always talking about precision, like everything has to be exactly right to the T. She needs to be in control of her environment. She's not someone who is mean or overbearing. Like she's a very warm, friendly person in general. She just is the ultimate perfectionist. She puts so much pressure on herself and the world around her to be perfect and needs to have control over everything. That to me is what I think of when I think of a modern woman. I've been Anna, so I know the feeling. The scene where you find out why Anna is like this was really emotional for me, and I bet it would be if anyone has seen this movie or if anybody decides to watch this movie. I'm willing to bet many women today will be able to relate. She basically confesses that she can't just relax and go with the flow because that was how her father was. Her father just relaxed and went with the flow. You do meet her father, played by John Lithgow, who is very erratic. You can tell just in the short time that they're having a conversation. He's erratic, he's all over the place. He's very unstable. He seems like a very loving, caring man, but he is just very unstable. And as she describes him, he's always, you know, looking for the next big thing, the next business deal, the next investment, and then the money disappeared and he just figured everything would all work out. When she ended up having to be the structure, she ended up having to work 2 jobs after school, and then they had their home repossessed on Christmas. Like, when we look at the root of why so many women are obsessed with perfectionism and control, it's gonna typically go back to the father. You're gonna typically find a father who was very erratic, very unstable, typically very childlike, somebody that's often linked with like addictions or really poor decisions, like instability. And I'm not saying the instability can't come from the mother, but for the most part, children look for stability from the father. And that's male and female children typically. You want the stability from your father. You want to know that your father is someone you can rely on, and somebody who is like the grounded masculine stability, like the rock of the family, like the one who is the tree rooted in the ground, that no matter what happens around him, he's still standing and he's still holding everything down. Like, that's what you want from a father figure. Ironically, we've put that on the mother. I hear this a lot. We put the idea of being the rock of the family on the mother. That's actually not what a mother is there for. The mother is for warmth and nurturing. Children are gonna look for stability from their father. It affects boys and girls, but in this particular case, it really shows how it affects young girls. And it can affect them in several ways. I mean, for some of them, they may get involved in the same kind of like destructive behaviors that the father is involved with. But very often you end up getting daughters who end up in that situation of this obsessive need to control. It gives you this sense of some kind of stability, because you're not finding that stability from a masculine leader being your father. You have to now become that inner masculine stability within yourself. Now, a woman being able to connect to her masculine stability, absolutely a positive thing. But if she lives her entire life that way, because she can't ever actually relax and let go of some control and actually learn to tap into her intuition and be able to flow with the way that life takes her, she's never really going to be able to fully tap into the fullness of her feminine strength, because Anna has a lot of feminine strength within her, but she's suppressing it because she doesn't trust it, because her father was just sort of in very erratic, wounded feminine energy, that she registered that anything that had that kind of like feminine flow to it was wrong, was bad. And this is a really common story. I feel like it kind of sums up my life. So Anna is trying to find that masculine stability within herself. She ends up in a relationship with Jeremy. And Jeremy is, when you meet him in the beginning, he seems like a decent guy. He's a cardiologist. He's very successful. He's classy. He seems very generous. He does a move though. Jeremy gifts Anna, his girlfriend of 4 years, who they are talking about buying an apartment together. He takes her to a beautiful dinner, tells her how much he loves her, and hands her a ring-size box that has a pair of earrings in them. I actually worked with a guy that was about to pull that same move with a girl he'd been with for a while, and he was asking me for like, you know, advice about jewelry and things like that, and I actually dissuaded him from doing that, and he ended up coming back later and like thanking me, because he realized later after I told him that, like, what a big mistake it would have been for him to do that. So guys, never give a woman anything that resembles a ring box unless you are ready to get down on one knee and propose. So Anna gets frustrated because, again, she's not in control. In fact, when she thinks he's about to propose, she's even like practicing her surprised faces, because she doesn't even trust herself to have like a natural surprised face. Like, she literally has to control everything. So her father basically tells her about this tradition in Ireland that on the leap year, there's kind of this flip where the woman can propose to a man. And because Jeremy, her boyfriend, is actually going to a medical conference in Ireland, she decides she's going to surprise him there, and on leap day she's going to propose to him, which is like, I mean, again, there are a few people that try to convince her that it seems desperate. Gotta be honest, it does. If after you've been dating a guy for 4 years, he has not proposed, you proposing to him is not the way to go about it. But in this movie, it's interesting because she's so desperate to get to Dublin, where Jeremy is. So many weather disasters keep happening that keep like rerouting her, and she's like fighting them. She's fighting these weather disasters like so incredibly. I've talked about on this channel before is that, you know, nature is the feminine. So weather changes, all these kind of things are the feminine, and it's literally like Mother Earth, like the feminine is literally telling her like, don't do this. Like, it's trying to keep her as far away from him as possible, and she's like literally trying to control the weather. She's trying to control the airlines. She's trying to control everything. Like, she's so obsessed with getting to Dublin by this day to do this thing, and it's just like, I mean, she ends up in the most ridiculous situations because she's fighting this so hard, and it's literally like her feminine is fighting her. I mean, I would say it's actually like her feminine intuition. Like, you could see it represented as these nature events and all these things that are happening are literally her feminine intuition screaming at her that this is the wrong move. Like, this is not what you're supposed to do. So Amy Adams ends up meeting Declan. And Declan runs this sort of like bar, pub, bed and breakfast kind of thing. They end up going on this journey together to go to Dublin. So Declan seems to be a little frustrated with Anna. They don't really have much attraction to each other at all. She is so like structured, controlling, and he is very closed off, closed-hearted. But he's also kind of like, doesn't really have much direction, doesn't really, he's not unstable, I wouldn't say, but he's just kind of a bit lost. So the fact that she is this massive like kind of control freak kind of person, and he's kind of in this kind of like, I don't care. They're not really coming together. They're on this journey together, and they have all these kind of different twists and turns that always kind of keep coming about on this struggle to get to Dublin. And I think some of it does become symbolic, because as this journey goes along, he steps into his masculine when he needs to. At one point, there's a group of guys that steal Anna's suitcase, and she tries to get it back, and they're gonna attack her. So Declan steps in and tries to protect her. He knows how to step into that masculine protector when he needs to. He also does kind of like lean back and kind of let her figure things out sometimes, and kind of let her walk in cow manure, or, you know, kind of just let her do her thing. You know, I mean, he's not really trying to control her. But as they go along, they really start to connect and get to know each other. She starts to loosen up a little bit as they're getting to know each other and moving along, and he's closed off. We find out that he actually has had a pretty serious heartbreak and really closed off to love, so he's kind of gradually opening up to her. She's kind of gradually letting go of this desperate need to control kind of thing as this is going along, like on this journey. And they end up at this bed and breakfast, which is interesting because they have to tell them that they're a married couple because they'll turn them away if they're not married, because this is a very Irish Catholic kind of community, right? So they have to pretend they're married. They have to stay in the same room together. It's really interesting. There's a poignant scene where they're fighting over who's going to sleep in the bed and who's going to sleep in the shower, and they kind of flip a coin and Declan ends up in the bed, and so Anna goes into the shower, and it's just like a screen, so he just sees kind of an outline of her, but she's kind of, you know, they kind of hadn't been getting along, and now all of a sudden she's there and she's being very like playful and silly and stuff, and yes, she's naked, so I get it. Obviously he's mesmerized by her nakedness, but she's also being very playful and silly, and that's really luring him in. It's the sensuality, but it's also the silliness, because she hasn't really shown a silly side. She's really been very serious and intense. And it's when you start to let your guard down and show your vulnerability, that's usually when a masculine man is going to start to really get magnetized to you. She wasn't able to do that with Jeremy. Now, when she was so upset that Jeremy gave her earrings instead of an engagement ring, she did not show any emotion until he got up and left. She would not show any emotion in front of Jeremy, which was a bad move, because if she had shown him emotion, he might have known that she was upset. Now, what he would have done about it, we don't know. When you shut down your emotion and pretend everything's fine, the silent version of I'm fine. When a woman says she's fine, she's never fine, right? She's closed down. She doesn't feel comfortable showing emotion in front of Jeremy. He's more serious. I mean, they're totally out of polarity because they're literally both just like masculine-minded people when they're together. With Declan, Anna starts to show vulnerability, and then she has the scene in the garden where she ends up talking about her father, and it starts out where she's so precisely trying to get carrots out of the garden because they're gonna cook dinner, because Declan is a cook in his pub and he's offered to cook everybody in the bed and breakfast dinner. So she was helping him in the garden. She's actually getting dirty in the garden, which isn't like her, right? She's been very polished, and, you know, she's literally like tuning in with the wild woman in her, but she's trying to like precisely measure the carrots to make sure that they're the right size. And, you know, he's just sort of like, yeah, you just grab a bunch of carrots. Oh, you got your carrots. Like, he's like, can't you just go with the flow? And she confesses about her father. And in that moment, she starts to show her vulnerability with him. And he gets very serious. Like, you can tell he starts stepping into more of his masculine strength, where he's holding space for her as she's sharing this vulnerability and she's opening up to him. And he's like, you know, I'm sorry. Like, I'm really, like, a father should be someone that you can rely on, which is exactly what she needed to hear, right? But you kind of get the impression that no one's ever really said that to her before. That moment is such beautiful polarity of her actually being able to soften and be vulnerable and actually explain to him, this is why I am. Like, I'm afraid to not be in control all the time. This is why I have to be in control all the time. And it's him accepting that about her, not judging her, not shaming her, not criticizing her for how she is, but literally just seeing her, witnessing her, holding the space for her, and understanding. Whew, like that moment to me was such a beautiful example of polarity. That wasn't even sexual at that point. They hadn't actually had any kind of sexual connection, but like, it was literally like the masculine and feminine bringing that out. Like, she was literally just starting to show her feminine vulnerability, and he was starting to show that masculine strength of being that grounded energy, and they coming together like that was just so beautiful. So they really start to connect. They're cooking, they make a great dinner. Of course, everybody at the bed and breakfast thinks that they're a couple, so they really kind of convince them to kiss. And so they kiss for the first time, and of course they have this moment of, I mean, that's usually what happens in the movies, which I actually think is really ironic, because I was thinking about this too as they were kissing, because I was watching this other video where they were talking about this modern idea of dating and the idea that people are like, well, we'll have sex and then we'll see where it goes. Whereas in movies, we kind of have this established idea in a movie that when the couple kisses, that's the moment that they realize that they're in love with each other. Like, it's in that moment that they kiss that's when the sparks happen and that they come together. Now, is that always the case? No, of course it's not in real life. But the fact that in our society, we have really convinced people that both kissing each other is the ultimate moment of two people realizing that they're in love, but they should also be like hooking up with each other and other people to like figure out if they want to actually keep hooking up or whether or not they want to date or something. It's a really weird idea that like we put such a high value on the kiss, but yet we're also encouraging this idea of promiscuity between couples. Like, well, you just hook up and you see where things go. But then in the movies, it's like the kiss becomes that moment when they know if they're meant to be together for the rest of their lives. It's a weird conflict we have in our society culturally of like overvaluing this idea of a first kiss, but completely devaluing the idea of people actually having sex with each other. It is interesting because I think Declan notices it as they're spending time together on this trip, that every time that Anna describes Jeremy, her boyfriend, who she's hoping to be her fiance, he's a cardiologist. Like, that's literally all she tells people about him. As if she's literally just dating him because she feels like he is stability. And Jeremy is, I mean, he's stable in a sense, although he is kind of always running off because he's always getting called in for some kind of surgery or something like that. He has financial stability for sure, but he's very detached. Like, he's very detached from emotion or anything like that. The thing that I find really interesting is when they actually get to Dublin, and I think that Anna and Declan's trip to Dublin, it softened Anna, and it kind of helped her release some of her need to control. You know, as she was going on the journey, every time there was something that would come up, she was less and less stressed out about something changing her plans as time went on. So it was literally teaching her how to let go to a certain extent, let go a little bit of that control. But I think it also was symbolic of the idea that it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And she's on this journey, and then she gets to her destination, and it's kind of like she's sad that the journey is done and that she's gotten to where she wants to go. It's the feminine heart. The feminine always wants things to go on. The feminine doesn't like endings to things. The masculine tends to like point A to point B, whereas the feminine is kind of like longs for things to come on. And that's actually her feminine coming out, like, oh, I don't want this journey to end because I'm enjoying this journey so much. And I think that's very symbolic of you know, when you're a perfectionist or need to control, you're always worried about the end game, which is more of a masculine mindset. Whereas the feminine wants things to keep going because it's really about the journey to get there than it is the actual full destination. And it was interesting because, you know, when she gets to Jeremy and she's trying to say goodbye to Declan, and there's this moment where she's kind of like between these two guys, and Jeremy's very excited to see her. It was interesting how he was so excited to see her and that she got there safely. But I thought about it, I'm like, this guy's a cardiologist, he's got all this money. Why didn't he try to make arrangements to find her, to get her to him? And there is something to the idea that while this man can provide for her, he wasn't really providing safety, and he wasn't taking charge and actually being the direction and being the leader of getting her safely to him. He was like glad that she got there, but wasn't really all that concerned with how she got there. Whereas somebody like Declan was more concerned with her getting there, even when he was frustrated with her. With the masculine and the feminine, like, Anna would say things like, I hate you, to Declan, and he would be really frustrated with her. The masculine and the feminine are designed to be different. And I'm not talking about abuse or if two people are absolutely miserable together. There is something too, if you're gonna have sexual polarity with somebody, it's your differences that make you sexually polarized. Like, you need things in common in a relationship, you know, and Jeremy and Anna had a lot of things in common. They both wanted to live in the same place. They both wanted, you know, a similar type lifestyle, at least they thought that they did at the time. They had these things in common, but they didn't really have any sexual polarity there. Whereas with Declan, they had these differences that actually polarize them. Like, a feminine woman can say to a man that she truly loves, like, I hate you, not because she actually hates him, but because she's feeling so much emotion in that moment, and that emotion that she's feeling is anger, frustration, and it comes out as I hate you. The fact that she's having these strong feelings and emotions for him is the polarity. It's their differences that are causing them to be sexually polarized. Now, if in a relationship you only have differences and you don't have any commonalities as far as how you want to live your lives together, well, that's not gonna work either, right? You need to have some similarities with somebody in order to create a relationship and create a life together. But you're also gonna need some differences because that's what creates the heat and the polarity in a relationship. So it appears like she's got all the commonalities with Jeremy. She has all of the polarity with Declan, and that's kind of where she gets into this conflict. So again, I started to question Jeremy when he was so excited that Anna got there, but I was like, wait a minute, but he hadn't actually done anything to help her get there. So that was a red flag for me. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie. Jeremy ends up getting down on one knee and proposing to her, which is exactly what Anna wanted. He had the ring, he had everything, and this is everything she's ever wanted, but now she's conflicted. She doesn't really know what to do. So she says yes to Jeremy. They go back to their life. They get the apartment of their dreams. Anna has everything that she thought that she wanted. But the thing is, Anna wasn't the same person anymore. She wasn't the same person that she was before, because before she was totally in her masculine shield. Anna's feminine heart's now coming out. That's actually the moment where I was really thinking about this whole domestication thing, because she literally is in this very minimalist box in an apartment in the city, and with all these people who were really so fake. I mean, it was just, I don't know, it was just all these friends, and everything was so perfect and polished and fake, and Anna really couldn't go back to that world. Like, she knew what it was like to be in the wild, to be, you know, connected to the earth, to be connected to, you know, her feminine heart. She couldn't go back to living that, like, very domesticated life. And when I say domesticated, I'm not talking about, you know, traditional versus non-traditional. I'm talking about the concept of our modern world, so to speak. She just couldn't go back to that. And then she ends up realizing that Jeremy really only proposed to her so that they could get the apartment, because they would get the apartment if they were married. The fact that it didn't come from the heart, Anna couldn't really handle that anymore. I mean, I know this is spoiler alert. I think everybody knew when the movie started she was gonna end up running off with Declan. The scene at the end where she goes to Declan has built up his pub and his restaurant to be this real big success. He's struggled, he's worked his way up. There is something to the difference between a man who, even if he's successful but things have all been handed to him, and I'm not saying that that always makes him a bad person, but the masculine really does step into his own when he has challenges. And the fact that Declan has made this success of himself, granted he's not making this big fancy, you know, cardiologist in the city kind of money, but he's worked his way up. And, you know, you actually show that he was struggling for a while, and all the people in his community were all gathering together to support him. All sort of the old Irish men that hung out in the pubs were all, you know, helping him get his business going. And, you know, the fact that he was part of a community and he was really taking on challenges and working his way up, like, that really does cultivate a masculine man, right? Like I've said before in many other videos, the masculine really needs a passion and purpose. He also needs challenges. Like, comfort kills masculinity. And I'm not saying at all that, like, Jeremy obviously had a very difficult job, but you kind of get the impression that Jeremy has been kind of handed things a lot of his life. It doesn't mean that he can't step into his masculine energy at all. But a man who's had to work for achieving his purpose and his masculine energy is probably going to cultivate a lot more of his masculine energy naturally within him, as opposed to a man who kind of gets handed his success. I'm not necessarily saying that either man is automatically going to become more masculine than the other, but you do tend to see it more often in a man who has had to really work for what he gets and work to achieve his purpose, probably step more into his masculine energy than a man who kind of may have a lot of success, but that the success has kind of been handed to him and he's had a relatively easy life. Nothing is that cut and dry, but that tends to be, you know, what you find in real life. So Anna goes back, she finds Declan, and it's really interesting how she really does open her heart and put her guard down and lets herself be vulnerable with him. There had been a storyline where Declan had had his heart broken, which is one of the reasons why he was so closed off, and that he had given his former fiance his mother's ring, and that was his most prized possession, and he wanted it back. And Anna had actually encouraged him to get it back. So she was kind of really supporting him in getting on with his life, moving on, trying to start over again. Like, she really did inspire him to kind of shake things up from kind of this mundane, kind of bitter life he'd been living to really step into his own. And as I've said before in other videos, the masculine will choose a feminine partner who is in the greatest support of his higher purpose, in whatever way that is. Even if it's just that she inspires him to, like, step up and you know, make a new move, or even inspire him to know that he's worthy of his purpose or something. Like, that's gonna be the woman for him. But he builds his business. He kind of knows that Anna is looking for this big status person, and he kind of made himself into a pretty successful man on his own in his own right for himself, but it was for sure inspired by his his interactions with Anna. So when Anna comes to him, and you know, I mean, he doesn't pursue her. He thinks Anna's happy. He thinks Anna's got what she wants. When Anna comes back to him, it was really great the way she did this, because she wasn't needy anymore. She went back to him and she like let her guard down, and she was basically, you know, like, I am here because I want to see where things go. She wants to go with the flow. She's feminine flow. Mind you, if it was a man saying what she was saying, I would run. But she was like, I want to go with the flow. I want to see how things go. And I don't have any plans after that, which is new for me. That's her thing. She was always so about making plans. And she literally let her guard down and was like, I don't want to make plans. I want to see where things go. You know, she was like actually expressing her feminine heart. Her feminine heart was like, you know what, I'm not gonna try to control every moment. I'm gonna release the need to control. I'm gonna let go, and I'm gonna surrender to what is meant to happen in the moment. So beautiful, like such a beautiful connection to her feminine. And it's interesting because he walks away in that moment, and she is completely convinced that it's done, it's over, that was him rejecting her. And she leaves and she's just crying and miserable. He comes to her and was like, it's kind of like, where'd you go? And she's like, well, you left. And he's like, well, I had to get something. And she's like, oh, well, that was the time to get, like, she kind of gets a little bit like argumentative with him. Basically tells her that he doesn't want to not make plans with her. He wants to make plans with her. Like, he's now stepped into his masculine. He's in his full masculine. He wants to make plans. He wants to make the decisions. He wants them to create a future together. Like, he wants to be able to be the leader. He wants to be the one that she can rely on. She has let down that need to control. She's surrendered to what is meant to happen with her life. She's surrendered that desperate need to control everything. So she's now relaxed in her feminine, and she's willing to open her heart. She's willing to cry. She's willing to accept the fact that life is not going to go exactly as she planned it. And that's the moment that he steps into that grounded stability of, I want to make plans with you. And he gets down on one knee and pulls out his mother's ring, and like it's beautiful. It's really beautiful the way that they shift that polarity. She was so out of her feminine. I mean, literally, like, nature was just trying to just shake her into her feminine energy, and just like, Mother Nature was literally trying to break down her masculine shield, and she was fighting it the whole way. And Declan, to be honest, I mean, he was definitely a masculine core being, but he was less an embodiment of his masculine energy. He was kind of lost. He was kind of bitter. He wasn't necessarily somebody who had a specific plan. He was kind of just going through the motions of life. He wasn't inspired to step up. And then them coming together was such a beautiful example of, he now had his masculine direction. He had his purpose, and he was ready to make plans. He was ready to have stability, and he was ready to be that stability for her, because she was now ready to kind of relax and let go and follow her heart, follow her feminine intuition. I mean, this movie, while it was very predictable, I mean, I kind of knew how it was going to go as the movie was going along, it was still a beautiful example of the way that the masculine and feminine can dance together, how two people can actually inspire each other to step into their full energies. And honestly, if you haven't seen this movie, if you're someone who is like a recovering perfectionist control freak, particularly as a woman, I think you'd really, really relate to Anna in this movie, because I know I did from my younger years. So I'm really glad I decided to watch this movie, even though it wasn't requested. I'd never heard of it before. And, you know, just for St. Patrick's Day, I've got my green on, and I just decided to, yeah, do a movie that took place in Ireland. Beautiful scenery, a lot of really cute, like, Irish superstitions. You have all these sort of like old Irishmen that are like, never start a journey on a Sunday or on a full moon, or they're all these kind of like Irish superstitions that were kind of dancing at play in this whole movie, and the scenery and the nature and everything was just really beautiful. So yeah, I thought this movie was a really great example of masculine feminine dynamics. So if you have not seen this movie, or even if you have, after you watch this video, I highly recommend you watch the movie, see if you can pick up on some of the things that I mentioned. I'm going to try to get some film clips of this movie and do some little mini breakdowns on my TikTok and here on my YouTube shorts, as long as copyright lets me do it. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up, and be sure you subscribe to my channel. If you're a woman who'd like to connect to her feminine energy, I have online courses. Details are in the description box below, along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.